Good morning. This is the video for the one act play. So a 10-minute play is 10 minutes. This is a fairly simple rule to understand, but when you're writing a 10-minute play, you actually must stick to the 10 minutes allotted you. As a writer, the timing is somewhat beyond your control if you're not also directing your piece, as the speed at which lines are said can change the pace of your story. However, to make sure you're on target when writing, be sure to read each draft out loud with a timer on hand. Now, if you end up with a 12 or 13-minute piece, that's just fine. I don't mind if it goes a little over the limit. Just please don't write another Hamlet. Create a story with an arc. It might seem obvious that you should write a story with an arc of some sort, but often what can happen in 10-minute plays is that you end up writing a sketch instead of a play. While the difference is minute, a sketch tends to be working towards a punchline. Often a play can have something similar to a punchline called the climax, but that isn't what the story is completely working towards. Instead, the climax just marks the apex of the story, not what the story has been working towards. So even when characters do not change, there is a realization or arc to the narrative beyond this final point. The action following the climax is equally as important as this is the resolution to or answers your question. How to write a 10-minute play. Number 1, ask a question. Every 10-minute play should ask a question. This truly goes for any play, but it is something to keep in mind when writing a 10-minute play, as it helps you avoid writing a sketch. Your play can ask any sort of a question. It can be a simple one, such as, what would happen if someone found their true love 2 months before their death? To something more ambiguous, like, is loyalty good? Whatever you ask, make this the thesis of your play. It will give your play purpose, keep your story focused, and reveal many other important things like your play's theme and motifs. How to write a 10-minute play. Number 2, develop your character or characters, conflict, and setting. After you've asked the main question of your play, you'll want to flesh out characters, setting, and the conflict that derives from your question. Character is extremely important as all of your ideas are communicated by your people. Because of this, you really want to focus on character first and foremost. It's a good idea to develop at least one complex character to intrigue your audience. They can be the antagonist or the protagonist. Then, if you get stuck, move on to the conflict that is rooted in the character's viewpoints. You can then focus on setting. Fleshing out minute details for a setting may be helpful to envision or see the play in your mind's eye. Now, these 3 things are not a list, and sometimes they can inform each other in ways that you had not thought of. For instance, if you have your character and your conflict going on, and you suddenly decide to change the setting, how does that change the conflict? How does that change your characters? So let it develop naturally, but just be sure that you're focusing on these things. How to write a 10-minute play. Number 3, skip exposition. As we've emphasized, you only have 10 minutes. Given this time constraint, you'll need to skip any exposition of any great detail to get to the center of your story. It really isn't worth the time you'll lose when you can be pushing the narrative. Keep in mind that in short plays, exposition often makes up a few sentences only, Look to be creative in adding exposition to a short narrative. In a 10-minute play, it is best to mention exposition within active dialogue. Example, rather than giving a long history of a car's mechanical failures, a brief line such as, "That thing was due to die anyway," will get you there efficiently and tell the story that you want to tell about a car's history. How to write a 10-minute play number 4. Introduce the conflict quickly. Introduce the conflict as soon as possible so that the audience knows why they're following your story right away. Now, don't introduce it in the first line of the dialogue, but ideally by the second minute at the latest. With so little time, you want to spend it with an audience who is involved, and the question is what invites the audience in and makes them a participant. If you have a more subtle conflict, it's still essential that you introduce the conflict as soon as possible. It's a part of answering the question you asked before you began writing, which brings me to question and conflict. Remember, conflict and questions are the key to your entire play. The question you ask is the substance of your theme and tells you of the direction that you're going and why the audience will be invested in discovering the answer. And the conflict is how you decide how you're going to explore all aspects of the question from both sides of opinion. Number 5, use the play to answer the question you asked. This might seem obvious, but your entire play should work to answer the question you've asked before you've even started your script. This could mean a resounding climax for some stories, or it can mean something more subtle and haunting. Whatever it is, every page, every line, every moment of your play should seek to somehow answer the question you asked at the beginning. So when editing your drafts, look at each part and ask yourself how the piece answers the question. If it doesn't answer the question, rewrite it so that it does, or simply lose it altogether. Let's take a look at some tips. One of the most exciting things of writing a 10-minute play is the experimentation you can easily incorporate into your story. It can be in a draft or in the piece itself, but given that you have such a short time, you can really get creative and take risks without wasting tons of time. So if it's your first time writing a 10-minute play, don't stress about getting things right, but instead, let your imagination take over and do the things you usually wouldn't think to do. The worst that can happen is you'll have to rewrite the piece, and that will only consist of 10 to 15 pages. Cut out extraneous details. It's called a 10-minute play. There is an actual time limit to the piece, so cut out anything that isn't relevant to your story. This could be a side character, a scene, or a line of dialogue. Once you've written your script, look at it with a critical eye and treat every detail of your story like a choice. Ask yourself if it answers your main question you posited at the beginning of the post, and if it doesn't, cut it out. I do this myself as a playwright. If it doesn't move the story, I let it go, no matter how well written the line is. Another tip, use action to add depth. This is where your stage directions come in handy. Avoid telling the entire story with dialogue alone. You have living, breathing people on stage who can use their bodies, their movement, their expressions to tell even more. Make your story more efficient and jam-pack it with more information by adding in action that signals deeper meanings. It doesn't work. This is one of the great problems of playwriting, and every playwright hits it. Somehow it's just not flowing the way you want it to. Now, if you're running into continuous issues, it may be worth letting someone else look at it. You could be wrong. You're in the middle of it and you don't have a viewpoint that someone else might have, but be sure of your choice as someone who is helpful, someone who's going to be giving you an objective view and who is willing to be helpful. Also, Be willing to accept that you don't like it and begin again. Or be willing to self-edit. Even though you have some really great lines that you hate to see go, is it moving it along? Is it slowing you down? Is it making the play go in a direction that you can't follow through? Sometimes you have to pull an Elsa and let it go. This is why you want to have several ideas before you begin. Now, if you do restart, you still have to go through each assignment breakdown. And let me know that you're doing this before its due date. Let's take a brief moment and look at format. Many of you have been reading plays, but you may not have given a consideration of how they're formatted in order to be easily read. First of all, please number the pages, whether they're in the upper right-hand corner, top center, or bottom, makes no difference, but if you would please number the pages, that would be very handy. Also, what would be really handy is if you were to put your name in the footer so that it prints out on every page. Keep in mind, I will be printing these all out for my reading and correcting. Secondly, the characters, character names. Here they've placed them in the center of the page. You can, as many plays do, put them on the left indent. There's no problem with that. What I think is handy here is that the character names are all in caps. That's very handy. Next, the stage directions. And stage directions are very helpful. Looking at two examples that the arrows are pointing here, we have John. He takes out his play from his backpack. And then Laura, frowning, perplexed by her work. So stage directions can either be actions or thoughts. John's is about an action so that we know what's happening in the play without seeing any blocking. Or the emotions of the actor, the character themselves. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? This is also helpful in the writing so that we don't need so much dialogue as to how someone feels when we can get that efficiently in the stage directions. This is something towards the end of your writing, a list of all of your characters. What they've done here is to list the characters and put them in boldface. What's nice about this is that we know who everyone is before we begin to play. Also, it helps us be a lot more efficient in writing about exposition if we already know who they are and what their positions are in the play. Then setting, letting us know where your story is going to take place. Unlike a Shakespeare play, where we have to use dialogue in order to set up where we are, this will give us the idea of where we are without having to use dialogue up as narrative in order to understand play setting. And then finally, the title of your play. Usually this is something that's selected at the end of the whole process. Many times it comes out of a pertinent line or something that is said during the course of the play. Now, some playwrights like to have a working title that has something to do with the theme or the question, which is a good idea in that it keeps you on track every time you pick it up, that you see the title is there and what it is you are writing about. The only thing you want to avoid is answering your question or your theme in the title, because then why are we watching the play? So let's take a look at the schedule of events. Each one of these has a grade attached to it. So each one of these assignments is graded, and that is how the totality of your grade will be put together. So firstly, Monday the 13th, which is a week away, I'd like to see some one-act ideas that you have, these questions that you want to have answered. Now, if you have questions or ideas or thoughts about this, please feel free to email me and ask me if I think these are good ideas. And let's start a dialogue about it. I have no problem with looking at this stuff anytime you want to, but be sure by the 13th I have those one-act ideas. Next, the following Monday, I'll want to see a play outline, a beginning, a middle, and an end, the arc of the play. Again, not fully realized. I just want to know where the story is going. Who's involved, how you plan to get there, what your climax is, and how you plan to end it. The following Monday, a rough draft of your play. So now we're really fleshing it out, so having that beginning, middle, and end, we're beginning to see the dialogue, what you're about. Does not have to be fully realized, but I want dialogue in the beginning, dialogue for the middle, and dialogue for the end. Then on Wednesday the 29th, a design concept for your set and costumes for your play. So just as the design concept is due, you will do the same thing for your play. These are 3 to 4 illustrations of your characters, where the place happens. And then ultimately, May 6th, the entire package is due. So it's a final script and the design concept put together as a final package, and this can be in PDF form. Please access me throughout this process. Any questions you have, any ideas you want to bounce off of me, please let me know. The most important tip I can give you is get started. This is absolutely the last project you can crank out overnight before it's due. This is why I want to check in with each phase of your project. Now, getting started really does happen just in your mind. Start toying with ideas in your mind. What story would you want to tell? How would you want to tell it? And most of all, don't stress about this. This is probably going to be a project that you've never attempted before, and you're entering into something that you've never done before, and this can cause anxiety. But the way I've constructed this project is in such a fashion that you will be taken step by step through each aspect of it. So I would encourage you, if you have questions at any point, please ask me. Ask me what it is that I would be looking for. Ask me for what it is you should be doing, or ask me for my opinion about where you are and whether or not it's something that you feel is worth pursuing. So please access me and don't stress about this. Next, the huge aspect of subject. What are you going to write about? How are you going to select it? Keep in mind, it should be something, again, that is personal to you, something that you care about, something that you want to work out. Now, normally, I don't like to give ideas for subjects because I found that when I toss out ideas, students tend to write that, thinking that it's what I want to hear. Or, because I planted a seed in their mind, they just can't get rid of it. But I'm going to break that rule this time because of 2 requests by students. And I'm going to offer up, if you would like, again, this is your choice, to talk about our present situation, meaning all of this new world we've all been forced into. I think there's a lot to be explored in different ways through individual viewpoints. There's so many ways to tell the story of what's going on right now. Think about the tones and styles and genres we've spoken about, and how your story could be an allegory or satire, an ancient tragedy. The key thing would be, what is your question, what is your theme, and how best one of these styles or genres work in telling your story. Again, to emphasize, please don't feel that you have to do this. I'm only bringing it up because it has been asked of me. Perhaps you want to write something that has absolutely nothing to do with the situation we are in right now because you're just sick and tired of it. But still, find what story you do want to tell. Find a way that you can pull yourself out of this. And lastly, don't judge your piece. Remember, don't judge your play. Don't compare it to some great playwright like Tennessee Williams or Sarah Ruhl. They've been doing it for years. Just make it your own. Say what it is that means something to you. or something you wish the world would listen to. It is not important if it is beautiful or incisive or earth-shattering. It is important that it is yours and that it expresses your ideas. I do hope that you end up enjoying this project. So many students I've had before have told me that this was their favorite project. And I think it's because they fully embrace the idea of it, of writing something out that has been bothering them, of letting go of an issue or pointing an issue out, of giving the opportunity to be able to tell someone, hear me, listen to who I am, or to open someone's eyes to something that they wish could be seen, or even to go back and rewrite a moment of their own personal life in such a fashion that they could correct what they did wrong. Art is about self-expression. It is about talking about yourself and how you see the world. It's your way of saying to the world, this is who I am. So I hope you enjoy this project, and I hope you let me help you enjoy this project. And remember, every aspect of this, please, let me know what you're thinking. Let me know your ideas. I am so disappointed that I am not on a one-on-one with all of you because this has been my favorite project and exploring ideas with all of you. So let's try to make the best of it and keep in contact with me. Thank you, and do take care, and do stay safe.